Growing up in a small town can make big dreams feel far away. And most athletes think it's impossible to get seen, impossible to get noticed, and impossible to make it to college football unless you're already on a national stage. But that's just not true. In today's video, I'm going to break down exactly how Cooper went from a small town athlete over in Montana with zero exposure to earning multiple real college football offers. I'll share the exact steps he took, what made him stand out, and what any athlete can learn from his journey. Now, I've worked with dozens of athletes who had no spotlight, no big school support, and no special connections, and still got real offers. So this story is not just inspiring, it's repeatable. With that said, let's get right into it. Now, Cooper is from a small town in Montana. He's not in Bozeman, he's not in Missoula, he's not even in Butte. The reality is that there's a lot of challenges that you face being in a small town. Now, the obvious one is the lack of population, the lack of exposure that comes from that area, not getting a lot of competition. This is all stuff that Cooper faced throughout his football career. Now, when Cooper first came to us, it was about this time, November of 2024. He had just gotten done with a amazing junior season. I mean, if you saw his highlight tape, you would be pretty wowed by it. But again, he was running into the same common issues that a lot of kids from small towns run into. They're balling out on Friday nights, they're performing extremely well, they're clearly the best player on their team, their conference, and probably within a 2-hour radius, but it doesn't matter because no one knows about them. So the key here was, how are we going to get Cooper seen, get him attention without being in an area where coaches are coming by often? For Cooper, the key was social media. We were able to fix up his X profile and craft it in a way that showed coaches what they wanted to see, as well as it got the right kind of eyes on him without needing to go to a big school or be on this huge stage. Immediately, Cooper started to see the results come in as he started to get replies and messages from coaches saying how much they liked his film, how much they wanted to recruit him. And it was all from the fact that he just started to put himself out there with his own name instead of relying on natural exposure from his high school or coaches coming by. Now, one of the big things that we saw was a lot of coaches mentioned how much they liked his highlight tape. And this is really because of the way that we crafted his highlight tape together to structure it in a clear way that, as I mentioned earlier, shows coaches what they want to see as early as possible and makes it clear that he is a college level player. Obviously, you want to put the best plays first. But Cooper was a two-way player, so obviously you're going to have a mix of both of those in those plays, but it's also about crafting together multiple tapes to show coaches what specifically they're looking for. So for example, for Cooper, he played both ways. He played offense and defense. On the offensive side, he was kind of an overall athlete. He would sometimes play running back, slot, a little bit of quarterback sometimes too. He was the best athlete, so they were going to put him in a good position there. And on the defensive side of the ball, he played defensive back. So what we did is we crafted together also two different highlight tapes, one for offense and one for defense, specifically showing his best plays from those sides of the ball. Because his original highlight tape was 8 minutes long and no coach is going to watch that entirely. So we started to break it up into these little chunks so that way it was consumable bit by bit. Another one of the keys in the highlight tape is when we talk about best plays, obviously we're talking about things like touchdowns and interceptions, but you have to realize that the result isn't always what matters the most. Just because you get that one interception doesn't mean it should be the first play. It's more about the best plays that showcase your actual skills, because you can have an interception, but it could be a tipped ball. You just happen to be in the right spot at the right time. You catch it and you fall down. That's not really a highlight. But let's say you're a weak outside linebacker. The play goes strong side. They sweep around the outside. They look like they're going to make a touchdown. And then you happen to chase them all the way from the field and go and grab them before they even score. That is much more of a highlight tape than that interception. Even though that result may be worse than the interception. You may think, wow, interception's a way better play on paper, but in terms of a highlight, that tackle where you showed effort, you showed your chase down speed and saved potential 6 points, that is much more of what coaches actually want to see besides just a lucky interception. And this is the way that we built Cooper's highlight tape, is that we showed the specific skill sets that coaches want to see. We showed big runs that showcase his speed, as well as his physicality on the offensive side of the ball. And on the defensive side, we showed his ability to cover the field as a defensive back. A couple key interceptions he made that most safeties wouldn't be able to make, just because they don't have the level of hands that Cooper has. Once we started to get him some attention, once we started to make sure that his brand is set up correctly on X, make sure that the highlight tape is set up correctly, it was time to start reaching out directly to college coaches in the best way possible. So we did this on two things: X, using DMs, as well as email. And again, the key here was using those bite-sized videos to give coaches just a sneak peek at what Cooper could do. And this did exactly what we were trying to do, just grab their attention. A lot of people try to get the offer on the first message or think that they're gonna get an offer within a week after they get a response from a coach, and that's just not the reality. You need to build a relationship with a coach. And so all we're trying to do within these messages is just grab their attention, get a response, and then move the conversation off of there to a phone call, to a visit, to a camp, so that way Cooper can impress them in other ways than just on their tape. This, again, isn't happening overnight. Cooper didn't get his first offer until about a couple months in. I think it was 2 to 3 months in. And so over those 2 to 3 months, it's all about discipline and making sure you're doing the right things daily. One of the key things I always say and try to remind families over and over again is that the recruiting process is not something that happens overnight. It's much more of a momentum-based game. If you can build momentum early on and continue that just by doing little actions. We're talking about things like posting on Twitter, sending messages, obviously, following up with coaches. That is going to add up over time as you become more aware by college coaches as a player that they want. As you build those relationships further with those coaches, it is going to slowly move you closer to that goal of getting an offer. And so a lot of families get this super high initial motivation, and then they have a great week, and then they totally drop the ball for the next couple months. And then they have to pick up from square zero again, and you're just in a tough spot at that point. You have to rebuild this momentum when there's potentially spots already gone, scholarships already given out, boards already full. And so making sure that you have that discipline and those habits in place is extremely critical. And Cooper did just that. He would constantly follow with coaches, constantly stay in touch with them, and post on Twitter, probably anywhere between, like, I would say 2 times a week for Cooper was like bare minimum. Sometimes you post like 4 to 5 times a week, and it helped a ton. Coaches would literally message him and say, hey man, like, saw your post, loved it, keep up the good work. And so it was clear that it was working and having that positive effect on not only exposure, but also the relationships that he currently had. Now, as I mentioned, Cooper got his first offer after about 2 months. What triggered that offer, to be fair, was just timing. He had already built the proper relationships and gotten noticed by the coaches. It really just came down to that these schools were not going to offer him until after February. Those schools wrapped up their signing classes. They started traveling around from school to school. And when they met Cooper in person at his school, because they already knew about him, they wanted to stop by, get him to meet in person, they ended up offering him right there on the spot and actually offered him a full ride, which, if you don't know, is extremely rare to get a full ride, because Cooper actually was not getting offers from D1s at this point. It was actually a NAA school, and that is extremely rare to get that kind of offer that early on from a small school. Even a D2, they would generally not tell you what the offer amount is, but this school did, because they wanted Cooper that much. They built such a good relationship with him, and he had showed them how good of a player he was, an important player to their program. Obviously, Cooper was amped up, super excited to get that offer, and then ended up getting 3 more offers after that, and then ended up actually committing to one of those schools about a couple months ago. Now, I think there's 3 key takeaways that you can take away from Cooper's process so you can apply it to your own journey today. Now, number 1 is what I talked about early on. Small schools do not have that big of an impact on your recruiting, especially in the modern recruiting process. With the power of social media, email, text, there's no excuse for that, oh, coaches aren't coming by my school. Coaches do not need to come by your school anymore. They just need to see digitally what you're doing. They can evaluate your film from anywhere. So this excuse that you're in too small of an area, too far from the coaches, is just not really viable. It's not real. So don't buy into that. Don't use that as an excuse. Find ways to still make it happen. The second thing is how the recruiting process is about timing, but not the way that you think. As I mentioned, Cooper started November of his junior year. If we were to start now, November of his senior year, I can't say that Cooper would get the same offers or if he would get any offers at all because it's so much later in the process. The fact that Cooper started relatively early, to be fair, he probably could have started sophomore year and maybe things would have been even more different. Maybe he gets to some Division I offers from schools like Montana State that he ended up talking to, but just, again, was hard to get on their board or move up on their board just because of how late he was getting that relationship. So the fact that Cooper started early-ish allowed him to get on these smaller schools' boards early on, establish a relationship, and be much higher likelihood to get an offer in which he did. Number 3 is how important social media is. Now, I already talked about that as a small school kid, it's great to use social media. But the fact of the matter is that Cooper's interest and offers really all came from X. He did get a pretty good amount of email replies, but as far as interest is concerned and the schools that offered him, they all came from X, whether they were DMing him or following him and then he DM'd them and they started a conversation on there. A lot of coaches were using that as an initial touch point. And so if you're not using X as a primary platform to get recruiting going, you're missing out on 80 to 90% of interest and offers that you could potentially get from that platform. So make sure you're using it to your advantage. Everything we talked about today is just a small part of what it really takes to turn a dream into a college offer. And even if you follow the exact same steps that Cooper took, having a real plan and the right guidance can make everything easier and faster. So if you want help getting on a coach's radar, building a great highlight tape, or creating real strategy that earns offers, check out the link below and book a free call with my team today. And once you do so, also check out the guide to the college football recruiting process. Here's the link to it. It's a 7-day quick start guide to the football recruitment process.